LA Knight's warning shakes Raw. Seth and Usos put on notice. Raw erupts after LA Knight. LA Knight sparks chaos. Trouble begins on Raw. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. What happens when a man who's spent years fighting for respect suddenly decides he doesn't need anyone's approval anymore? And what if LA Knight's warning to Seth Rollins and the Usos on Raw wasn't just a threat, but the beginning of a complete power shift inside WWE? Because after what happened on May 18, 2026, something felt different. You could feel it in the arena before anybody even picked up a microphone. The crowd wasn't just loud, they were tense. That kind of tension where fans know something bad is coming, but nobody knows exactly when it's going to explode. And somehow, in the middle of all that pressure, LA Knight walked out looking completely calm. Not nervous. Not desperate. Calm. Honestly, that's what made the whole thing feel dangerous. You know somebody's serious when they stop trying to impress people. That's the energy LA Knight had all night. He wasn't out there chasing reactions. He looked like a guy who had already decided exactly what he was going to do before Raw even started. And the scary part is, Seth Rollins noticed it immediately. Now to be fair, Seth Rollins isn't exactly easy to intimidate. This is a guy who has survived betrayals, injuries, faction wars, title losses, fan backlash, and somehow still walks around like he owns the place. And honestly, sometimes he kind of does. Seth has built a legacy out of surviving chaos. Every time people think he's finished, he somehow reinvents himself again. But lately there's been this weird edge to him. Almost paranoid. Like he knows people are coming for his spot from every direction. And maybe he's right. Because LA Knight didn't come to Raw looking for attention. He came looking for leverage. Then the Usos arrived, and suddenly the entire atmosphere shifted. The second their music hit, the crowd completely exploded. Phones went up everywhere, people screaming before Jimmy and Jay even appeared on stage. That's star power. No matter how chaotic their history gets, the Usos still feel like major players every single time they walk into an arena. But even they looked cautious tonight. Not scared exactly, just careful. Like they understood something wasn't sitting right. Then Seth Rollins started talking, and right away you could tell this wasn't going to be one of his usual playful promos. No dancing. No laughing. No fake confidence. He sounded irritated. Genuinely irritated. Seth talked about carrying Raw for years and surviving every generation that tried to replace him. He basically said everybody suddenly wants to target him because attaching your name to Seth Rollins instantly makes you relevant. Now look, arrogant? Absolutely. But completely wrong? Not really. Still, the crowd reaction changed instantly the second LA Knight interrupted him. That pop was insane. The arena came alive immediately, and you could actually see Seth's face tighten for a second. Tiny detail, but wrestling fans noticed those things. Seth realized very quickly he wasn't controlling the room anymore. LA Knight walked to the ring slowly, almost amused by the tension around him. He didn't rush. He didn't start yelling. He just stood there staring at Seth Rollins and the Usos like he was studying them. And honestly, that silence made the segment even bigger because everybody knew something serious was coming. Then LA Knight finally started talking. Not screaming. Not overacting. Just speaking like a man who genuinely believed everybody standing in front of him was already making mistakes. He told Seth Rollins that for years he's survived because people underestimate how manipulative he really is. He called Seth a politician. A master strategist who always finds somebody else to take the damage first while he protects himself. And the crowd reacted immediately because deep down, fans know there's truth in that. Seth Rollins has always been brilliant at keeping himself one step ahead while everybody else crashes around him. Then LA Knight turned toward the Usos, and that's when the whole arena got quieter. Because suddenly this wasn't just about Seth anymore. LA Knight warned Jimmy and Jay that they were standing too close to a fire they couldn't control. He told them Seth Rollins doesn't build alliances, he builds protection. And once people stop being useful to him, he lets them burn. That line hit hard. Especially when you think about Seth's history. Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn. There's always emotional destruction somewhere around Seth Rollins eventually. Trusting Seth in WWE is basically like seeing a giant warning sign and still deciding to walk directly into danger anyway. And you could see Jey Uso reacting to it. Not with words, but with expressions. Small details. Tiny hesitation. That's what made this segment feel real. Jey's character lately has been layered because he constantly looks torn between loyalty and instinct. He wants peace, but peace around the bloodline usually lasts about as long as a wrestling contract signing. Jimmy looked more defensive though. More offended that LA Knight was questioning their judgment. Which makes sense because the Usos never react well when outsiders involve themselves in family business. Historically, that usually ends with somebody getting super kicked into another dimension. Then Seth Rollins finally snapped. And honestly, that's when the segment became great. Because the real Seth Rollins finally came out. Not the performer. Not the entertainer. The bitter version. The guy who genuinely hates being disrespected. Seth stepped right into LA Knight's face and accused him of trying to manipulate the entire situation for his own benefit. Then he said something that immediately changed the mood of the segment. Seth told LA Knight that while he built legacies, LA Knight only built moments. And wow, the crowd reacted instantly. Because that criticism has followed LA Knight for years. Fans love him, but there's always been debate about whether WWE truly sees him as a top-level cornerstone or just a massively popular attraction. So when Seth said that, it actually felt personal. For 1 second, LA Knight looked irritated. Like Seth had genuinely touched a nerve. But then he smiled again. That smile seriously carried half this segment. LA Knight told Seth something that completely shifted the energy inside the arena. He said Seth keeps talking about history because deep down he already knows his future is slipping away. That line absolutely destroyed the crowd. People lost their minds. And Seth's reaction sold everything because for a split second, he looked unsure of himself. Just for a moment. But that's all great storytelling needs sometimes. One tiny crack in somebody's confidence can completely change how fans see them. That's what LA Knight accomplished tonight. He planted doubt. Not just inside Seth Rollins, but inside the Usos too. And honestly, that's probably more dangerous than any physical attack. Then LA Knight looked at Jimmy and Jey one last time and warned them that when the storm finally hits Raw, everybody standing beside Seth Rollins is going down with him. Then he dropped the microphone and left. No brawl. No cheap attack. No wild ending. And somehow that made the whole thing even more intense because now everybody's waiting for the explosion that hasn't happened yet. That anticipation is what makes wrestling stories work. Fans love mystery. The second WWE gives people uncertainty, the internet turns into a detective agency. Everybody starts fantasy booking betrayals, alliances, title matches, and heel turns before Raw even ends. Wrestling fans are honestly undefeated when it comes to creating chaos in their own heads. But the backstage moments afterward made everything even more interesting. Later in the night, cameras showed Seth Rollins backstage pacing around furious. And not fake wrestling show furious either. Real angry. You could tell LA Knight's words got under his skin badly. Seth kept repeating that nobody controls his future and nobody threatens him. Which usually means somebody definitely got inside your head. Meanwhile, the Usos had their own backstage conversation, and this part mattered more than people realized. Jey quietly questioned whether LA Knight might actually be right about Seth using people when convenient. Jimmy immediately shut the idea down, but you could still feel tension there. And once trust starts cracking in WWE, disaster usually follows pretty quickly. Fans online noticed it immediately too. Social media completely exploded after the segment ended. Some people were saying LA Knight finally feels like a genuine main event level threat, while others think Seth Rollins is about to become even more dangerous now that somebody has embarrassed him publicly.